Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. In this video, we're going to learn how we can handle the denial of permission from the user, as well as how we can request permission using activity result contracts. Now, before everything, let's see our use case from the previous video when the user denied the permission. So make sure before that you have uninstalled the application and reinstall the application, because whenever you reinstall the application, you will just request permission for the first time. So all permissions are by default not granted. So here, if you click on the check camera permission, if you deny and you click again, and then this time you deny and don't ask again, here the check camera permission button will not work again. So how we can handle this? Well, before everything, let's have a look at how the process of requesting permission actually works. So the first thing is that you will not ask for permission whenever your app launches. This is not the best practice to do this. You only ask for permissions whenever you need them. So in our use case here, the check camera permission button, say for example, it takes you to a screen where your app is using the camera feature to capture images. So once we click on the button, the permission is requested. And this is the first thing, requesting permissions. Now, if the user accepts the permission and grants your application the permission, then you will just use the feature and continue with your app. But if the user denies, then we will show a message to the user saying why your application needs this permission. And it makes the user more comfortable giving you the permission after he's informed why this particular application needs this particular permission. Now, after showing the message, you can again ask for the user's permission. He can allow or deny and don't ask again. Once he denies forever or permanently, then your application will not be able to request a permission anymore, like as we have seen here within our application. So again, if you want to help the user, for example, in the future to access this feature or enable the permission to access this feature, then you can also show some kind of an UI to help the user navigate to the settings and grant the permission manually from the settings. Generally, you have to respect the user's choice about rejecting your permission. But if the user, for example, want to access this particular feature, then help them to manually go and enable this feature or this permission from the settings. So first of all, how we can show that message whenever the user denies the permission? Well, for this, we have a very handy function called should show request permission rational, which helps you detect when the user denies the permission. So here, within the read context permission, just under the F block, we will add an else if block, and we would use the should show request permission rational. So here, else if should show request permission rational, and here you have to pass the permission that you are looking for. In this case, we are requesting the read context permission. So let's just add the read context permission here. And now this function is a function that returns a Boolean value, so true or false. It will return true whenever the permission is denied. So here within the else if block is the place that you inform the user about why you need the permission. So for this, we will just create a simple piece of UI called a dialog. In this video, we're not going to talk a lot about the dialog because it will be saved for a future video. So I would rather create it very quickly. So here, we're going to create an alert dialog builder, and we pass this. So here we will set a title for this dialog. So the title is going to be why we need this permission. Then we're going to set a message to this dialog. So for example, here, if you are creating some kind of a phone application where you need the contacts to be shown and to dial some numbers, like just like the Truecaller app, then we'll need the contacts permission to make it simple to access your contacts within your app. And here we're going to pass set positive button, which is going to be the button that you click on to perform the positive action. So in this case, it's going to be OK button. And here we are going to have to add a functionality to this button. So here, this functionality or this click listener here passes two things. The first one is the dialog, and the second one, we don't really care about it for now. So it's just going to pass an underscore. And here, if the user clicks OK, then we are going to request the permission once again. Here, we are going to request the permission. And once we do so, we want to dismiss the dialog. So we use the dialog parameter here. And then we finally add a negative button If the user, for example, cancels, then we just want to simply dismiss the dialog. And finally, we will show this dialog. So let's just copy the code and paste it for the camera permission. Here, underneath the if block, else if, just change this to camera here and there. And finally, let's just change the message parameter here, or the message for the dialog. So now let's run. And before that, let's just uninstall the application so it appears as if we are requesting the permission for the first time. So now let's request the permission. So check camera permission. Here we will deny it. So the should show request permission will return true for the camera permission. Try again to request the permission. And here you can see our rational. If you click cancel, the dialog will simply dismiss. If you click again on the camera permission and click OK, then it will request the permission once again. Again, if you deny it and try again, it will just going to be an infinite loop of requesting the permission with the should show rational dialog. But if you deny and don't ask again, then again, this check camera permission button will not work anymore. And this is because the user has permanently denied your permission, and your permission cannot be granted unless the user goes to the settings and enable this permission manually. So now let's handle this case. But first, let's trace the code. So here, if the camera permission is granted, well, it goes here. Well, it doesn't go here as the camera permission is false. Then it goes to the else if should show rational. Well, we said that the rational returns true if the permission is denied. In this case, our permission is permanently denied, so it will return false. Then it goes to the else block, and here it requests the permission. But we didn't see the dialog in our code once we permanently denied the permission. Well, that's because the request permission here returns before showing the dialog. However, it calls the on request permission result. And here it goes within this code of the camera permission request code. But in this case, the permission is not granted. So it will not go within this if block. So that means this is the best place to handle if the permission is permanently denied. So if the permission is granted, we will get here. If it's not granted, so it means it's denied, we'll go to the else block. So we want to check if we have already shown the user our message of why we need this permission. So here we first check if the should show request permission rational has been fired. So add the not, and here call the should show request rational for the camera permission. And here we will just again add a dialog, and within this dialog we will say that the permission is permanently denied, and if the user wishes to continue to enable this feature or go to the camera feature, then he must enable the permission from the settings. So here the title is permission is permanently denied. If you wish to continue to enable this feature, you could go and enable it manually by clicking OK. So here within the set positive button, we'll create an intent that takes the user to the settings of the application to allow him to enable the permission manually. So here intent is going to be intent, and here we're going to pass an action to this intent. So the action is going to come from the settings class. So settings dot action application details settings, and here we will pass some data to this intent. So we want to tell it which action or which application that we need to view its settings. In this case, we need to view the settings of our own application. So for this, we have to specify that with a URI. Here for the scheme, pass the string package, and for the SSP string, we're going to pass package or package name of our application, and finally pass no for the last parameter, which is the fragment. Lastly, just call start activity and pass your intent. Now again, let's do this for the read context as well. Just copy the whole else block here and paste it for the read contacts. Only thing we need to change is the read contacts here. Now let's just uninstall the application and run it once again. So here, check camera permission, deny it, check again, you can see the rationale, we need the camera permission to capture images. If you click OK, then just deny it and don't ask again. You can see that the permission is permanently denied. If you wish to continue and enable this feature, you could go and enable it manually from the settings by clicking OK. In this case, we're going to click OK, and now it takes us to the settings screen of the application. You can go to permission and enable the camera permission manually. However, we will just leave it for now and try the read contacts permission button. Here, deny again. We chose the rational, click OK, and we're just gonna deny, try again, OK, and deny and don't ask again. Here again, we see that permission is permanently denied for the read contacts. We can click OK, takes us again to the settings screen of our app. We can then go here and enable both of the permissions manually. In this case, the user can now go and navigate to that screen that uses that feature or that permission. Now, if you notice one thing, that the permission state text view doesn't get updated. And this is because we call the function that updates the text view within the onCreate. And as you know, the onCreate is only called once during the lifetime of the activity. So it's always advisable to check for the permission states within the onResume. So in this case, I'm going to move this function into the onResume, and let's just override it here above the onCreate, and just after the supercall, paste the update permission state. Now let's quickly try to test this by just uninstalling the application and run it once again. And here we're going to check the camera permission, going to deny and check again, click OK, deny and don't ask again. And here it will take us to the settings screen, click OK, go to the settings screen, here enable the camera manually, and then let's go back to our app. And you can see here the text view gets updated as the onResume is called again and the permission states gets updated. So it's always advisable to check for the permission states within the onResume callback. Now I think we're done with the part where we handle the denial of permission from the user. Now the only one thing left is to request permission using the activity result contracts. To request permission with activity result contracts, you have two ways. If you want to request each permission separately, then you could use the request permission contract. But if you wish to request multiple permissions at one time or on a button click, for example, then you could use request multiple permissions contract. The only difference between them is that the request permission contract only gives you a lambda that has a Boolean parameter, which you can use to check if the permission is granted or not. Whereas the request multiple permissions gives you a map, which has items that represent each permission and their granted states. So the key of the map is going to be the permission name, and the value of the map is going to be true or false, whether the permission is granted or not. Now, the advantage of using the activity result contracts to request permission is that you get rid of the permission request codes. So both of these, you don't want them anymore, and you won't be using them to check if the callback is fired by requesting this permission or any other permissions. Additionally, you will get rid of a lot of code that you write within the onRequest permission result. However, the onRequest permission result is not deprecated, it's still used, but if you just want to handle the request code yourself, then you should use the onRequest permission result callback. And if you don't wish to do so, then you can simply use activity contracts to request your permissions. So now let's create an activity contract with request multiple permissions. So here I'm going to call it permissions launcher, and then register for activity result. And here we have to pass a contract. So we said that we are going to use activity result contracts.request multiple permissions. As you can see here, we have request permission and request multiple permissions. So we're going to use the request multiple permissions, add the constructor, and open the lambda function. Here you can see it's just a map of string and boolean. So I'm just going to call it permission states. And here we are going to check if each permission is granted. And here, if the permission state, going to check for the key, which is the camera. So each key represents each permission that you are requesting. So manifest.permission.camera. Here it returns the value of this key within the map. So the value is going to be true or false, whether this permission is granted or not. So here I'm checking if the permission is granted. Then I want to do the same thing that we did within the onRequest permission result callback. So here for the camera permission, what we did was just adding the toast and updating the permission state. And then in the else block, we want to add the same one here for the camera. We want to help the user to navigate to the settings to enable the permission manually if he wishes to. let's get rid of this code that checks for the camera permission. Again, go back, add the code here, and we'll do the same thing for the read context permission. So if permission state manifest.permission.read context permission equals to true, then we want to add the same code from the onRequest permission callback. Here, if the read context permission is granted, we want to update the state and show the toast. And if it's not granted, gonna check for the irrational and help the user to navigate manually to these settings. Now we can just completely delete the onPermission request result callback, and we could also get rid of the permission request codes for the read contacts and for the camera permission. Paste the code, and we are done. The only thing to do is to just launch this launcher. So here, whenever we request the permission, we want to launch this launcher. So for the request permission here, which requests the read contacts, we want to launch this launcher here. Permission launcher.launch. Here it takes an array of permissions, so pass an array of permission. And if you are just using the request permission contract, then it will only take the string that you are requesting, which is in this case the read context permission. But since we are using multiple permissions, then we are going to use the array of. And here you can also, if you want to just request 2 or more permissions at one time, then you can pass the other permission here. Let's just get rid of this request permission. Again, add the same thing here on the else block. And now for the camera permission, gonna pass the camera, get rid of the request permissions function, copy this code, and add it on the else block here. Now again, let's just uninstall the application and reinstall it once again. So nothing changes, just work as before, but with less code. Check for permission. Here it shows the permission, can allow it. And the problem is now it shows the permission is permanently denied because we launched the launcher with only one permission, which is the camera permission. So that means that the permission states here map will not be having the read contacts permission. So the whole thing here returns false, and since it returns false, the else block here will be called and it will show that the read contacts permission has been permanently denied. So the first thing here before checking for the read contacts permission is that we need to check if the read contacts permission is within the permission states. So permission states dot contains key read contacts permission. Similarly for the camera permission, contains key the camera permission. But if you, for example, launching this launcher with multiple permissions at one time, then you don't need to check for if the permission stays here or if the map contains the camera permission or that particular permission that you are requesting. So that's it. You can just run and test it yourself. Now, as a best practice for permissions, make sure always to request permission whenever you need them. Don't request permissions once the application is running or on its first launch if the application states currently doesn't need this permission. So similar to our example, whenever we click on the button that takes us to the camera feature within our app, then we want to access or we want to ask for permission first before accessing the camera feature. Then always check for permission whenever you are using some kind of feature, as the user can manually go to the settings and disable this permission, which will lead your app to crash if it's using something that is not eligible for it to use. Additionally, always be transparent with the user. Show the user why you need this kind of permission and explain the reasons behind requesting this particular permission, as it makes the user more comfortable with your application or with granting this permission to your application. Now, I highly suggest you to go and read the documentations of requesting permissions in Android, as there are some kind of permissions that work for some kind of Android versions and don't work for other versions, and also some kind of permissions that you can combine within a single request permission dialog that the user have to accept them combined. For example, like the location permissions and for the read and write storage permissions. So it's highly recommended to read about the permission that you are going to use or request within your app before using it. In addition to that, I highly suggest you to practice requesting permission and reading and writing the code of requesting the permissions manually, just to get a sense of how requesting permission works in Android. And as a bonus for this video, I have included 2 libraries that ease the process of requesting permissions. The first one is Permission Dispatcher or Dispatcher Permissions, and the second one is Easy Permissions. You can look them up, you can look at their documentations to ease your process of requesting permissions within your application. And finally, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.